In this next section, we have a unit circle before us, and what we're going to do is we're going to determine the trig functions for any of these angles. And if you notice, they're all the special triangles we talked about in the last video, the 30, 60, 90 triangles or the 45, 45, 90 triangles. But you may look over here and you think 120 or 135, that's not a 30, 60, 90 or a 45, 45, 90. But what we can look at is what's called the reference angle. And the reference angle is just the angle that's in standard position, and it's an acute angle. It's formed by the terminal side and the x-axis. So for example, although you see 120 degrees, that doesn't look like an acute angle, but if I take the terminal side, here is my initial side, remember, and I look at my terminal side, and then I look down to the x-axis. Okay, so I'm coming down to the x-axis. The angle formed right here, call it theta, from the terminal side to the x-axis is called my reference angle, and that's the angle that I'm going to use. So in this case, we know that this is 180 degrees, this is 120 degrees, so this theta is going to be 60 degrees. You may say, well, if I look here at 225 degrees, here's my terminal side, here's my 225 degrees. I see what is its reference angle to the x-axis. The reference angle to the x-axis, I would take 225 from, or I'd take 180 from 225, and I would get that to be a 45-degree angle. So again, we can do it one more time. Say I have 330 degrees over here. I draw my terminal side. I say, well, what is the reference angle to the x-axis? I have, this is all the way around would be 360. 360 take away 330. This reference angle would be 30 degrees, and here would be my triangle. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at this unit circle, and we're going to look at the value of 30 degrees. We're going to look at 135 degrees. We're going to look at 240 degrees. And we're going to look at 330 degrees. And we are going to find the actual ordered pair. Now remember in the last section we said that the cosine of our angle is going to be the x value. And the sine of our angle is going to be our y value. So it essentially goes cosine of the angle, sine of the angle. And so we're going to find our ordered pairs. Now, you may say, one question that will come up is, well, when is the cosine going to be positive? When is it going to be negative? Well, we know that in the first quadrant, all points are positive. So, we're going to do a little memorization thing. I mean, all. Now, over here, the x-coordinates are negative. So, the cosine over here is going to be negative. But the sine is positive. So put an S, and students will do a memorization trick. All students, S is for sine. Sine is positive in the second quadrant. Look down here. Now both sine and cosine are going to be negative in the third quadrant. But think about tangent. Remember tangent, opposite over adjacent. So the y over the x, the sine over the cosine, that's going to, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So tangent is going to be positive here. All students take, and I'll just give it to you, calculus. All students take calculus. Cosine, the x-coordinate, is positive here. Cosine, and we go down, the sine values are negative, but the cosine, the x values, are positive here. All students take calculus. This just helps us figure out where are our trig functions positive and where are they negative. All signs are positive here. Sine is only positive in the second quadrant. Tangent is only positive in the third quadrant. And cosine is the only positive trig function in the fourth quadrant. So, as I begin, there's some of these that we may know right away. Like, you know, this point right here is 1, 0. Let's fill in the obvious ones. We know up here this point is 0, 1. over here, if this is a unit circle, remember we're talking about a unit circle with a radius of 1, that has to be -1, 0. And down here we get 0, -1, radius of 1. So what I said we were going to focus on is a 30, 135, 225, and 330. So if I take my 30 degree, I am going to draw my terminal side to 30 degrees, drop this 90-degree angle, and I'm going to, so if I have a 30 degrees, I have to think back to my trig functions. I know across from the 30-degree angle is going to be 1/2, because remember the hypotenuse is going to be 1. And then the other leg, this will be 60 right here. This will be square root of 3 over 2. So what is the cosine value, the x-coordinate? The x-coordinate is adjacent over hypotenuse, so square root of 3 over 2 over 1. But dividing by 1 doesn't change the value, so we'll just keep it as square root of 3 over 2. And the sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so 1/2 divided by 1 is still going to be 1/2. And we know that all trig functions are positive here, so it stays positive. Next we're going to come over here, we're going to look at 135 degrees. So I'm going to draw my terminal side. I'm going to draw in my reference angle right here. Now what angle does that make? If this is 135 degrees and this is 180, what's the difference? That would be a 45-degree angle. And I know that the hypotenuse has to be 1, and in a 45, 90 triangle, the two sides are square root of 2 over 2, square root of 2 over 2. So this would have to be, the cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Again, over the hypotenuse is just dividing by 1, doesn't change the value. For sine, the y value is opposite over hypotenuse. We end up with square root of 2 over 2, comma, square root of 2 over 2. But now remember, the only thing that's positive in the second quadrant is sine. So that cosine value is negative. Next we're going to come down to 240 degrees. I'm going to draw in my terminal side, draw my reference angle. This now is going to scribble those out. This will make a reference angle. If this is 240, this is 80, this is going to be a 60-degree reference angle, 60 degree. So across from 60, remember I get square, or here, well, let's do our hypotenuse first. We have a hypotenuse of 1. Here I'll get the square root of 3 over 2, and across from the 30 degrees is just the side of 1/2. So we're getting a little sloppy here, and I apologize for that. So 60 degrees, we want first the cosine value. The cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So if this is my angle, adjacent to this angle of 60 degrees is 1/2. Over hypotenuse of 1 still gives me 1/2. Sine value is opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite the 60 degrees is square root of 3 over 2. Now, all students take calculus. Remember this. All students take calculus. The only thing positive in the third quadrant is tangent and cotangent. So both of these values are going to be negative. And the last trig function we're going to look at is 300. Oh, you know what? I wrote that in the wrong line. I just realized. Sorry. I just wrote that. You probably wrote it in the right line. So okay, and then the last trig function we're going to look at is 330 degrees. I already did my terminal side. Draw my reference angle would be 30 degrees. Cross from 30 I know is 1/2. The hypotenuse is 1. And this long side is square root of 3 over 2. So the cosine of 30 is adjacent over hypotenuse. The sine value of 30 degrees is opposite over hypotenuse. Now I know from my memorization way to figure out whether or not the signs are positive or negative that the cosine is the only thing that is going to be positive in this quadrant, so the sine value has to take on a negative. Now the only other thing we need to do is it said we have to write the radian measure. So we have to find 30 degrees is going to be what radian. So if I have 30 degrees, remember from a couple days ago, we multiply by pi radians over 180 degrees. The degrees cancel. 30 over 180 goes in 6 times, so it would be pi over 6 radians. So I'll write a big pi over 6. Alright, so this one, just go ahead and figure this out. So we have 135 degrees times it by, oops, sorry, you can't see that, times pi radians over 180. That reduces. If you're not sure what that reduces, just use your fraction button on your calculator. Use your fraction button, and it reduces to 3/4. So that'd be 3 pi over 4 radians. Or they're both divisible by 5, and keep going until you find out what the lowest factors are. And lastly, well, you can do the rest on your own. I'll give you these two. This is 4 pi over 3, and 330 degrees is 11 pi over 6. For your assignment today, what you need to do is you need to complete this unit circle. You need to find all other sides, all other coordinates, all these coordinates, and all of their radian measure.